time to learn something new with guest speaker David Hunter Pybus.
Double dose of me, it must be like getting the COVID jab and the flu jab together. I'm not quite sure how safe that is. Quick announcements. My wife Kath will again be near the big Easter egg. So if you're facing the stairs in Granada deck number 1, it's to the right of you, or down this alleyway here. For any of you who are new to the talks and wanted a scent stick from Titanic, that's the first message. The products that you see here, not now for sale. I think I told you the other day, the last 500 bottles of the Titanic ones, Sense of Time, Night Star was sold by auction to China. So we don't have any available, but you will have a memory of a scent stick. And this story really is, as you know from the Titanic story, Adolf Safelt, he boarded the ship of dreams. So did we, and it all went wrong, and I'll tell you why over 5 years. Because the year we launched, 2007, of course, the next year, 2008, the banks went down the drain. All sorts of things happened to not make it work for us. Now, you lot, I think, I've got the measure for you. I think you like a funny story, don't you? You heard the music, Indiana Jones. I used to be known as the Indiana Jones of the perfume or the scent business because of what I did, going out searching for these perfumes lost in time. And I thought one day, I did give talks to kids at schools to try and get them interested in chemistry, science, you know, and again, what more attractive can you be for teenagers than talking about the scent of attraction, as it were. So I thought, well, I'll do the Indiana Jones theme. So I've got a hat, perfect hat. I've got a machete, which I'll probably have to hand in under some sort of knife amnesty, but it is a garden machete, and I needed a whip. So I thought, where do I get a whip from? And my daughter said, well, Ann Summers, Dad, if you dare. Well, why wouldn't I dare? You know, I'm Indiana Jones. So I went along to Ann Summers, and I was thinking, I know the story, you know, science presenter, get kids interested in science, all of that. So I went in with my story and said, right, you're not going to believe this, but I'm a science presenter. She said, a young lady said, I've heard them all, sir. What do you want? And I said, I want a whip, please. So she literally, honestly, and you fellas know this, she took me to the whip department, and there are various sizes of whips for various prices, believe it or not. I've still got it in my case. So, and the kids, of course, loved the story. You can ask her. So again, it's given under the auspices of Alchemy, my company, which again, it's the whole concept of changing minds, making people think. And again, learning something new, because I don't think many of you will know the story of Sense of Time. There they are. There were 5 of them. There was going to be a 6th. So I'm going to tell you the 4 stories of the other ones that were launched, and a couple of little stories as we drifted off into oblivion. So yes, I went on Dragon's Den, and I faced these 5 characters. Richard Farley, we've got Duncan there, Valentine, Theo, Deborah, and Peter. And Theo and Peter gave me 40 grand each for 20% each of the business. I did think 60% of my business still meant I was in charge. And again, thinking about it, 60% of something was better than 100% of nothing. So to move on from there. It was in the book, actually, the first book that came out on Dragon's Den. And I've got to tell you this story as well. Deborah, who I think was left 40 million by her dad, that's how she came into this business. Because I had no product, I just had this concept. I had mock-up bottles and packages, but no, you know, I couldn't say my sales for the past 3 years have been this. It was just a concept, but I did win them over. But Deborah said, because I'd said at one point, I don't know whether to stack them high and sell them cheap, or because they are really special, like something from Titanic, to really put a price on them. I'm still thinking about that. And she said, you call yourself a marketing man when you can't even decide that? And I said, well, Deborah, I've got a master's degree in marketing, and I'm an external examiner to the Chartered Institute of Marketing. So if I'm not a marketing man, we're all in trouble. That was edited out. you know, you're after their money, so you can't insult them. But sometimes they've got to see if you've got a bit of grit and fight back, you know, and get it to 30, 40 or something. And there were a couple of things where they were really nasty to me, and it was edited out. Now, how's your German? Because that does say the Indiana Jones of Dufte, of the perfume business. And there was me with my products behind me. I was more famous in Germany than I was in my own country. It was just the way it was. Sometimes you know, you get the media interested in things, sometimes they aren't. And those were little leaflets about the product which gave the fragrance description as well. I found a couple of things wrong with the perfume business. One is that you're buying dreams, you know, for certain prices, but they don't describe it. You know, you look at the chemistry, if you like, it says cinnamic aldehyde. What does that mean? Well, it means cinnamon in a way, so there's cinnamon in it. But they're very difficult to define, and I wanted to teach people properly, particularly blokes going to duty-free for their wives, you know, what perfume to buy. And we used to have a company called Pandora, not the jewelry people, that taught the people in duty-free throughout the whole country how to sell, on the basis that it was the second sale that was the most important, because people came back to you believing that you had led them down the right path. So if a guy said, my wife likes Chanel 5 and white linen, but I'd like to get her something new, then the girl would say, or the guy would say, they are floral aldehydic perfumes. We've got a brand new in that area. It's a bit like if your wife liked, let's say, jazz and country music, don't go and buy a heavy metal rock, you know. All the music is different. And there are 14 different areas, if you like, musical areas, if you like, of fragrances. So if you learn them, then you get a much better idea. So most guys do the default, Chanel, Dior. You know, you're going to buy something from a bloke who was on Dragon's Den? Probably get a frying pan in your face. So, you know. So that was one of the things I wanted to do with Sense of Time. So there they are. There's the different tribes, if you like, of perfume. And the other reason I did that was because you're getting a perfume from Titanic or a perfume from the Mayan kingdom of Mexico. You wanted to say that it was like modern fragrances. It was like these particular modern fragrances. So again, if your wife liked that or you liked particular aftershave, then it was going to be right for you. And there's Maya, Nenufar, PYXIS. And here we've got CHRISM, which didn't come out, Night Star, and ANKH. So that came in a little booklet, and the booklet also told the story of how the perfumes were lost and found and recreated. And they were lost because of these things: shipwrecks, volcanic explosions, Vesuvius in that particular case, and accidents, earthquakes. There were the 9, because I did bring out 5, but the others were going to come along. And you can see in some cases shipwreck, volcanic explosion, earthquake, burial, ingested by mummies, I'll explain that, shipwrecks, living flowers, and Jehovah's incense. So just a quick reprieve on Night Star. Those of you saw Titanic yesterday. It came from Titanic. It came as a story of the iceberg and Adolf Safelt and the bag that was picked up with his treasure from the bottom of the Atlantic, with the files of perfume, some in terrible condition, but one in pristine condition, and this was Night Star. So again, you can see it is there. It's on that flower and that petal, if you like, and that is a soft oriental fragrance. And it gave the head, heart, and what I call head, heart, and soul notes of the perfume. So that was Night Star, and as I say, you can have a sample smelling strip. I think Kat's got about 50 left. The new ones, the ones you didn't hear about, well, this was the first one, Nenufar. It means blue lotus, Cleopatra's fragrance. And I kept seeing, when I traveled in Egypt, I kept seeing things like gods up close and personal with a particular flower, the blue lotus, and animals, and the girls here, the dancing and singing girls, again with the blue lotus against their noses, and even, as I said, animals. And when I was in a water garden near Stoke-on-Trent, I saw the blue lotus. This is the blue lotus from Egypt, and I thought, my goodness me, that is the real thing that is on these monuments in Egypt. And I believe as well, because inside the blue lotus is a chemical called myristicin. Now, myristicin is akin to LSD. The Egyptians didn't get the effect of LSD by smelling the lotus. They actually dissolved it in alcohol and drank it. And I believe that lady, Cleopatra, she held in awe the two greatest people at the time, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. She got them drunk on lotus wine. So I saw that, and I immediately got, this is a real perfumer here, Montserrat Molin, Spanish perfumer. I took her along, more or less chucked her in there to smell it. And we also have, you see this sophisticated little machine here? This is something I can do by myself, because I can put that with a bubble across the flower and collect its fragrance and stick it into a charcoal filter, take that back to the labs, and we can get a fingerprint of the perfume. So the combination of a fingerprint of the perfume and a perfumer smelling it will recreate the perfume of the blue lotus. So that was Nenufar from Egypt. And again, when we did the family, it's, as you see, it's a water from the water family. Very thin, watery fragrance. There's the petal. So a little bit like June, if you know June, that sort of fragrance. But the whole idea was, yes, these are ancient fragrances. What's a modern equivalent that you might like, and therefore you would give it a try. And then ANKH, Tutankhamun's Aroma of Intrigue. Now again, I found the formula carved on a wall at Edfu on the Nile, and that's, if you like, it's a bit like finding a Jamie Oliver recipe 2,000 years from now, carved on a wall. So you find the recipe, you can make it, can't you? And that's what I found, the recipe for this. And again, when Howard Carter discovered the tomb of Tutankhamun, there were a lot of these inside. There were behind the chairs, unguent jars of unguents with perfume that were meant to be buried with the god. Here's a few of them. So inside here, with the ANKH and the lion head, they were full of frankincense, myrrh, or liburnum, or complete fragrances. And on the floor were balls of incense. And it was those balls of incense that we took and recreated. You can make a liquid form of incense. So there's the balls. We took some of those and put them through research and recreated ANKH. The ANKH is this. I think this was the original Christian cross, which lost its loop when Moses came across from Egypt into Sinai. So there it is, the Temple of Edfu, and the formula. Obviously, I don't read hieroglyphics. I had it translated for me, and that created ANKH. That was the only one. We never know when we're making these things what they're going to be like. Are they going to be female, male fragrances, or unisex? This was the only unisex fragrance, and of course it was for a boy king, so that made sense that it had a masculinity to it. Whoa, I'm going backwards. And there we are. The scent ANKH is an oriental fragrance, which you would expect from Egypt. It's a woody oriental, so wood like tree bark, like leaves of wood, like twigs. That's also roots are very, very woody. So that gave us ANKH, the unisex fragrance. The next one was Maya. I happened to be very lucky and live in Mexico for 3 years. This was before all the real problems with drugs there. Lived in Mexico City, and the Mexicans had an expression, para mí las mayas, para mi esposa las playas. My wife liked the beach and the sunshine, sunbathing. I liked the ancient civilizations of the Aztecs and the Mayas, and I would clamber, when you could clamber, over their buildings and have a look at their civilizations. So there was this guy, I don't know if you can read the bottom thing, Edward Thompson, American explorer in Chichen Itza. We're going back to the 1920s now. And he had a good look at Chichen Itza, and he had a good look at this place. I don't know if any of you have been there, but this is a cenote. It was formed when that great asteroid smashed into us 60 million years ago. It created a lot of limestone caverns in Mexico. And here you see the people on, this is a sacrificial altar. Young girls were thrown into that well, and that well was about 100 feet deep. They were given balls of copal incense and other things and married to the rain god to make rain come again. And of course, if they could survive the plunge and survive swimming to the side, there would be liana branches they could maybe clamber out. If they couldn't survive, then they had truly married the rain god. Now he actually thought, I wonder what's down there. So he had this big grab built and sent down, and he went to Greece and learned, you know, the old Greek diving helmets with the great big heads and everything, the tops. He learnt from the sponge divers. He learnt diving, and he went down. The grab made a corridor through the mud and the rubbish, and he went down, poking with his hands. It was pitch black, thinking, oh, something there. Feels like a skull. Picking it out, picking things out, putting them in the basket, bringing them back up. And there's the grab. It's still there in the museum at Chichen Itza. And he brought up these gold, silver objects, but he also brought up copal incense. And it was from that, and the ingredients of that, the copal mixed with things. The girls were drugged. You can imagine, can't you? There's no way you're going to normally plunge 200 feet into a well. And so that's how we got Maya, which, as you can see, is a soft oriental, another soft oriental. And of course, coming from Mexico, it had chocolate in it. Chocolate comes from an Aztec word, chocolate. So we've got a few words of Aztec in our language, like guacamole, chocolate, and of course, vanilla. This was, Mexico for many years was the source of vanilla to the old and the new world. Eventually we moved vanilla pods into the Indian Ocean, places like Mauritius, and there's quite a few islands now that grow vanilla. But of course, vanilla, chocolate, who doesn't like that? It's the first and second in ice creams, followed closely by strawberry. So that's how we got that one, the soft oriental Mayan fragrance called Maya. Now to Pompeii. Now, at the same time that I'd gone and picked up these files from Titanic, I read that they'd found a perfumer's garden in Pompeii. And yes, Pompeii was incinerated by Vesuvius. But from the burnt seeds in this guy's garden, the herbs, the spices, the flowers, we could recreate like a scene of crime reconstruction. So I worked with botanists and archaeologists and came away with the sense of a perfume from this guy, Sperato, a perfumer. You know, perfumes were much, much cheaper in Pompeii than they were in Rome. So you could go down to Pompeii with your wife, girlfriend, or whatever, have a terrific time there, holiday, and still have enough money left to buy a load of perfume. Those of you who've seen the film Spartacus might remember exactly that, because in Pompeii there was a gladiatorial training school. So it was a good weekend away with bottles of perfume to accompany it as well. So here's the volcanic ash plunging down through Pompeii, and just here near the amphitheatre, near the gladiatorial amphitheatre, again, good business, good trade, selling perfume to the gladiators, selling perfume to the ladies, and here was a garden of Sperato. This was it, with the seeds of the herbs, and this is reconstruction, the seeds of herbs and spices. And again, in the House of Mysteries, I saw this, the classic thing of these little pixies or cupids mixing, making perfume, and the lady in that classic thing of smelling it on the back of her hand. So hence PYXIS, little pixies, and also PY, it's in my name, Pybus, pyromancer, it means fire, the fire of Vesuvius. So that's how PYXIS got its name. There's another classic sketch there of the lady opening the phial of perfume. So it seemed natural to call PYXIS that. And again, there's the map of Pompeii, and the spot there. There's the amphitheatre. The spot just around here was the perfumer's garden. And we found these sorts of flowers and seeds, as you see, dill, viola, and various others. So we put them together into the scents caught in time of Pompeii and the fragrance from Pompeii. With those as well, apple, mint, wild thyme, and so on. So this was PYXIS, and it came out to be a mossy, woody fragrance, often called Chypres, after the island, the French name for the island of Cyprus. So again, they were all coming out very different. Mossy woods there for PYXIS. Now what I was going to do, my next one, was the fragrance of Olympia. And I had been working in the oldest, the men in the Olympics 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, were naked. Women weren't allowed to watch the Olympic Games. And of course, Greek being white-skinned like us, they perfumed themselves. They used oil against sunburn, and it was perfumed. It was not only a perfume to a particular goddess, so it would protect them. And the perfumes for the Olympic Games, you sold a lot of them because there were a lot of contestants. Now, I worked in a place called Pyrgos Mavrouraki in Cyprus, the oldest perfumery in the world as far as we know, 4,000 years old. Here's the mixing pits for it. And again, you could find at the bottom of these the ingredients that we're putting together for making the perfumes. There's some more pots. And these were the names given to these different perfumes. Chypres, I mentioned, the fragrance of Cyprus, that was the most common one. Mystico, aurum, which means gold in Latin, and so on. So again, we put together, or we're going to put together, one of those. Now, here's the beginning of the breaking of the dream. 2012, we closed the time of the centenary of Titanic. Why? Partly why was because in 2009, I knew the Olympic Games were going to be in London. And I went to the London Olympic Committee and said, got this idea for a fragrance for the Olympics. There are 24,000 athletes. Let's give them all free a vial of perfume, just as a little souvenir of the Olympic Games in London. And I will recreate this perfume, and with your help and support, marketing-wise, we'll sell it, and £1 a bottle will go to the Olympic Committee for, helping schools, helping sport, whatever. Great idea, they said. £80,000, please. They wanted £80,000 from me to create my idea. And of course, I'd only got 80 grand from the two dragons. And with that 80 grand, I had to make the perfume, bottle it, box it, do samples, recreate, do a marketing thing. I didn't have 80 grand. So it didn't happen. So they didn't get £1 a bottle. You see, these Olympic committees, like the next one I'm going to do, they're all people in sinecures, retired major generals or something like that who have no concept of business. So that didn't work. That one didn't work. CHRISM, the anointing oil of monarchy, Elizabeth I said that remember the eagle and the spoon? Elizabeth I said that it spelled evil. Well, it would, because there's no such thing as refrigeration those days. And nevertheless, it had a formula, and I showed this the other day. When Charles was anointed, it's the most sacred part of the ceremony, because you're anointed in God's name. So that anointing oil is very much a part of our history. And here's the formula for it. Now, you might not know it. It's a lot of Latin, but let me put the words in for you. Bergamot, bitter orange tree. Jasmine, rosemary, cinnamon, benzoin. Benzoin's like a tree sap. Ambergris, I told you that yesterday about the sperm whale. Musk from the musk deer. Civet from the civet cat. Rose, sesame oil, and rose water. Now that's when I was, as I said, 20-odd years ago, I wrote to the Duke of Norfolk, who organises coronations, saying, you need to get those animal derivatives out of there. So we did, we reformulated it. And again, I said, look, I can recreate this. It's not sacred. It's not blessed by the Archbishop of Canterbury, but a bit of fun, bit of history, and £1 for every bottle will go to the Prince's Trust. Great idea, they said. £100,000, please. So you begin to see that I was going downwards fast. Everybody liked my ideas, but I had to pay for them. Ketoret, this is from the Jewish religion. The thing about incense, the thing about burning incense, it was the one way you could pray to God for luck in war or peace or whatever, because the smoke of incense was the only thing, according to mythology, if you like, that crossed the space between heaven and earth. So if you wanted your God to hear you and bless your words, you burnt incense and sent it up to heaven. So Ketoret from, you see here, the Ark of the Covenant. Now again, I had to tread carefully here because, as you will see, here's the beginning of the formula from Exodus, and it's not everything is there, but God clearly says it must not be used by man. Man will be cut off from his people. So again, I'm not particularly religious myself, but I did not want the wrath of God on me. So I spoke with the authorities in Jerusalem to say, what about a perfume? Would that be considered the same? And they assured me it wouldn't. So happy with that, I thought, well, I can recreate Ketoret and put it on the market. So this was going to be the next one. I was always thinking a couple of years ahead. And of course, the bit I liked was the discovery, the adventure. The bit I didn't like was the packing and the shipping and the problems you get with customers. But again, from Jerusalem, and we know that the Romans sacked Jerusalem and took away, they've got the menorah there, they took away all the treasures from the temple, but they didn't get, because of course if you're going to have Ketoret burning, and that was the presence of God, you needed a lot of it, you couldn't run out of it. So there was a guy called Wendell Jones, and that might be where the original Indiana Jones came from. He found a huge heap outside Jerusalem, and in it were 3 kinds of cinnamon, saffron, balsam, myrrh, galbanum, which is a root, and you saw that in the write-up in Exodus of making the incense for Jehovah, cassia, which is a form of cinnamon, and frankincense. So from that, we can begin to get the core of the perfume. Then they found a shipwreck in Greece, and in that shipwreck were all the ingredients of Ketoret. It included, you know, when you eat winkles, if you ever eat winkles and you have a pin to take the little operculum, the little, like a nail off the end before you go for the winkle. There's a seashell in the Mediterranean. You need thousands of them to make, or tens of thousands, to make a kilo of purple dye. And what was purple dye? The emperor, the most important color. Nobody else could wear purple. But these little sea snails were crushed up and put in the formula for Ketoret because they were like a smoke influencer. They made more smoke, and more smoke meant more prayers going up to heaven. So here are the products that are in Jehovah's designer fragrance. There's the little operculi there. And there's the formula for Ketoret. You see galbanum, myrrh, galbanum and myrrh, frankincense, and one other product, cinnamon I think it is, are mentioned in Exodus. Only 4 are mentioned, but it actually has all of those. There's the percentages and everything. Now again, I wouldn't dream of making that and burning it because it's sacred. In my travels, I'm always interested in seeing things like this was in Portland where they said about this particular ship, SS Kayara, that was sunk, and on it were all these little bottles of perfume, most of them pretty bad, pretty oxidized. So interesting story, but I wouldn't be able to make much of that at all. And then I read about this. In fact, they approached me. I called it Bonnie Blue. I'll tell you why in a second. The Americans approached me because they could see this thing about Indiana Jones and perfume expert, and they said they'd found on the Mary Celeste, it's not the very famous Mary Celeste. Mary Celeste is Mary of Heaven. So a lot of ships were named after it. But it had sank in Bermuda. It was a paddle steamer, as you can see, sank in Bermuda, and they'd found a bottle of perfume on it, and they asked me to tell them what it was. I called it Bonnie Blue. I'd nearly produced it. I said that was going to be the next one, because this was the original Confederate flag, was the Bonnie Blue, just that bit, the blue with a white star. It was called the Bonnie Blue before they developed into the cross and the stars of the states that were involved in the Confederacy. Now the boat itself was part of a blockade runner. The South didn't have an awful lot. They had a load of cotton, but not much else. The North had the industry, they had the guns, they had the ammo, everything. So the South went to the UK and the Main to trade cotton for guns and ammunition. And these blockade runners had to run the American blockade off the coast, the east coast of America, to get through with the guns and ammunition. And these guys were part of it. They were on this ship, the Marie Celeste, another picture of a different sort of ship, but there were quite a few of these blockade runners. There it is sank, you see the paddle wheel here, and lots of ships sunk around Bermuda. Somewhere in here we are, is the Marie Celeste. Now in a cabinet, in a cabin, was this bottle of perfume. And from other stuff that they had, they realized it was, the guy had bought it in Liverpool for his wife back in Charleston, but it didn't make it. So they just wanted to know what it was, and they brought it up from the deep. Here's the exploration going on around it. Here's the bottle, and it looks fairly pristine, but again, no label, nothing to tell them what perfume it was. And the bottles those days tended to be quite standardized, so you couldn't get it from the shape either. So I started to look in books, because on the bottom of the bottle I saw the name Lubin, L-U-B-I-N, and I knew very, very famous French fragrance company, but they wouldn't have used a bottle like that. It was too cheap. Then I saw Peace and Lubin. So this guy was a chemist, Charles Peace, and he joined up with a guy who just happened to have the name Lubin, but he wasn't the fragrance company Lubin. And they developed fragrances so the name would stick in people's minds. They developed all these different, you see from the prices, £0.50, 5 shilling, and synthetic scents, a novelty, because before then, the scents, the perfumes were made of natural products, very, very expensive, but suddenly we can get this chemistry from oil and create much cheaper products. So looking in Rimmel's book, the Book of Perfumes, I began to find a few perfumes that were made and used at the time, because we know the date when the ship went down. Now before that, there's an example of a real Lubin fragrance, and you see quality, black jade, made for Marie Antoinette, and still going strong after 300 years. In the Civil War, around the time of the sinking, Lubin made these fragrances. So the next stage was going to be, which one of those is it? Let's get the formula for them. Let's look at the fragrance in the bottle, and we can work out at the end of the day which of them it was. You see London there, and you see Peace. So the actual bottle was giving me the clue to what the fragrance was. Now that guy was really unfortunate. He was saved in Bermuda, 2 of them, saved from drowning, but they came back to Liverpool for another go at it, at gun running, and the boat and the lifeboat that tried to help them was sunk just off the Welsh coast on the way back to Bermuda. So again, the end of a dream, the end of a story. When next for me? Well, again, this is real Indiana Jones territory. You saw that little bubble that could save the fragrance of a flower. Well, I'd read about this incredible flower in Iran and another one in Tibet that were really special, very different sort of aroma, fragrance. I wanted to capture it and bring it back to the UK and have the perfumers recreate it. But you can probably guess that going to somewhere like Iran or Tibet, which is the Chinese, you know, with my little apparatus saying I'm looking to capture the fragrance of a flower is a pretty dangerous thing to think about at the time. So it's probably not going to happen. And so the combination of, do you know, I went to the Titanic Museum in Belfast, and I had that bottle of fragrance with me. And the guy, the buyer at the museum, couldn't get it. I said, this has come from Titanic. You've heard the story, recreated. This place was selling rubbers, pencils, pens, T-shirts with Titanic on. I've got a real thing from Titanic, and he couldn't get it. So by the time he couldn't get that, by the time the Princess Trust wanted 100 grand for my idea, by the time the Olympic Committee, 2012, wanted 80 grand for my idea, I began to think I'm on some sort of conveyor belt here, and it's only going to go downwards. So that's why we would have had to put our house on the market, remortgage the house, which is a pretty dangerous thing to do. And as I said, the banks went down, so all the little guys that could make me 200 bottles at a time, fill it for me. From my own company, I got the fragrances pretty cheaply, you can imagine, but they needed to be put in alcohol, they needed to be bottled, they needed to be boxed, they needed the little booklets to be printed, all of that. And 200 at a time, but they went bust because of the banks and everything. So the big guys, the guys that packed for Chanel and Dior and Estee Lauder, they wanted me to make 5,000 at a time. Now 5,000 at a time, if you know anything about business, that ties your money up. The cash flow of doing that is incredible. Nobody's going to walk in a shop in John Lewis's and buy 5,000 bottles. They're going out one at a time. So in every single way I was being hit by failure in trying to do anything more than we did. So we brought out 5. It was fun doing it. I don't regret doing it because you would always think, what if? Kath helped me greatly as well, coming along and doing the hard bit for me, the paperwork, letting me go off into these incredibly interesting places and because I have hot feet, as you probably know. And that was it, really. So you don't see them on the market. You can't. If you're interested, you could always check. From time to time, they do come up on eBay. Full bottle, unused. I think people bought them as an investment, and indeed, I did have the tax people ring me 1 or 2 times because product was on the market, but I seemingly wasn't in business. I said, no, I'm not. The company is dormant. It closed in 2012. The last 500 bottles went to China. That is it. There were something like another 500 bottles of the other 4 that I gave to a big company near Aspie de la Zouche. It was a company that helped charities, so they would give stuff out for the charity to have a raffle over, so that was a useful thing as well. And the Masons actually bought a couple of 100 bottles from me as well. So it all went, and that was for a charity thing. So it all went for a good cause. And I was hoping that, a bit like that girl that Procter & Gamble bought her business, name escapes me now, but they came along with a few million and said, here's the business. And what I was hoping is somebody would come along and appreciate that this wasn't a bad idea and it could be extended, and just for me to do the adventure bit, to do the traveling, do the digging, do the finding, and forget about all the harder bits, the paperwork and all of that, and even the selling. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That is the, I'm glad I was able to fill the gap, and I do hope my colleague gets better soon. We'll find out in a couple of days. So, sense of time, learned something new, I hope you have, and Alchemy, the company that presented it for you. Thank you very much.